What does a life coach do?
I would be charging $1 an hour.
No, what do you bring to the table?
At what point, right, you realize that life coach is a real job?
What does a life coach really do? This is your daily Ketchup. Boom.
We're eating now, guys.
That's right. So in our brand new food review show, we will be trying new, famous, personal and exotic dishes as we work together towards creating an unofficial guide of our best food finds.
So subscribe and join us on this new food journey where we create the Grubby Guide. Subscribe.
Today's episode is brought to you by AIA Singapore. We've all heard about life coaches, but what do they actually do? Well, today we're lucky enough to speak to one to learn all about this rather confusing job.
This is some news report.
I'm sorry. It's just a thing I do. So this guest right here is Mr. Mark Van Heusen, or his actual pronunciation of the name I'm going to try.
Okay.
Mark Van Heusen.
Yeah, really good.
No, wait. Can you say it? Can you
It's
say
his
it?
job to be
Can I
encouraging.
say it's Mark van Heusen?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it German, is it?
Dutch.
Or Dutch?
So anyway, Mark is a life coach. And more importantly, he actually has some history with John.
Hey, not more importantly,
Ooh.
but this is the guy that I did my first emceeing gig with. It was my sister's wedding. So so Mark and I are not blood related but family. His cousin is my brother-in-law. Correct?
Ken.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let me just get this out. Okay, I haven't seen Mark in a long time, and I want to say that when I was like, how old was I? Like maybe 17, 18.
Yeah.
I was tasked to MC with him. He being slightly older than me, he just like took lead, which I'm very grateful for. So then on that day, right, he asked me, do you want to come 1 hour early to rehearse? Then I'm like, need ah. Then, but yes lah, because I was nervous as shit. I got stage fright, right? And so when I met him earlier, the 1 hour before, and he didn't bring a script, he didn't bring shit, and he just like,
Whoa.
he just did the entire wedding plus the jokes plus the banter. Then I holding my cue card, I don't even understand my handwriting because it's so shit. That was my stage fright trauma. Like when I get paid to MC stuff, right, and I say no, right, I think about, I can't repeat that day.
Oh
Thanks,
my
man.
God.
No.
Thanks, John. And now John is getting
it's-
back at me and having me in front of a screen.
No, it's how good you were, you know. And I always say this, right? You know, you really bomb a MC gig, right? When you're taking a piss in the toilet, right? And then some random uncle will be like, hey, good job, you did well, okay?
Why are you still peeing in the urinal? You know?
That's when you know you dropped the bomb, okay? You know, people trying to...
Okay, so before we get too derailed, right? Mark, can you just tell us, for those who don't know,
Yeah.
i.e. all of us, what does a life coach do?
What does a life coach do? Maybe I'll take it a step back and looking at what coaching really is about. So the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, defines...
There's an international...
There is.
Wait, so do they coach all sorts of things? Like the International Coaching Federation?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Are they an uplifting organisation?
They better
Very
be, right?
inspirational.
Okay.
Maybe got a lot of politics.
Okay.
So that's just one organization of a few, but they define coaching as one in which your coach partners together with a client in a thought-provoking and creative process so that you inspire the coachee to be able to maximize their personal and professional potential. So that's what coaching in general is about.
It's
as a
so
definition.
legit.
You all see how, like, as I MC that wedding that time.
Stop it, John.
Hello.
So, I guess the only other coach I know is what, a career coach?
Oh, gym coach.
Gym coach.
A gym coach?
You've got business
No,
coaches
personal
as
trainer
well.
lah.
Those guys are under your federation also?
No. So
Shut
that
up,
is different.
No, he say got a bunch of different kind of coaches.
Okay.
Oh, he talking about the bus to Genting. Anyway, before we get too derailed. No, so then what does a life coach?
Yeah, the life coach.
Like the specific aspect of it.
Right. So then when we talk about coaching, and now there are different areas in coaching. So a life coach would focus mainly around life. How do you lead a good life?
So there's a bucket, right? There's career coaching, so you don't know what to do with your career.
Yeah.
Then there are psychiatrists or shrinks.
Yeah.
Where does this line on that spectrum? Because I feel like between that two, we settled it already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, you really just want to knock him down today?
Hey, wait, come on! No, I try to define it because you know you get general.
So where is your value?
No, what do you bring to the table?
Exactly. Why should people pay money
Yeah.
to life coaches? Well, I love what you brought up, the fact that you talk about a spectrum. So when we think about counselors and therapists, usually they deal with people on the spectrum of mental health where you have issues. So thinking of negative to 0 on that side of the spectrum, when you're feeling really down, that's where you tend to work with a counselor or a therapist. But if you think from 0 to positive,
Right.
thinking of reaching your fullest potential, living a good life, thriving and flourishing, that's where you tend to work with coaches and a life coach.
So is a career coach like a subset of a life coach?
Yes. So if part of life, you really want to focus on improving your own career,
Right.
then you'd speak with a career coach because then it's very specific about your goal to improve your career. Get further, make a job transition, whether it's a career pivot you're looking at or accelerating your career.
So what are like some of the main, I'm not sure whether issues is the right word because now we're at the positive section, right? What are the main things that your clients tend to want to focus on?
So if you tend to look at a life coach, if you're thinking about how do I improve my relationships, not necessarily just finding romantic relationships, but also improving friendships,
Right. Or family relationships.
or family relationships. If they want to think about making a house move, thinking about their physical environment, making a choice on whether they should stay in one country or move abroad, and helping them to talk through that process. That could be something a life coach might look at.
So with as little offense as possible,
Yes.
at what point, right, you realize that life coach is a real job? No, that like this is a job that people will pay money to do. Like because it sounds so
When you see
generic. It
your
sounds
life
like
coach friend bawling.
it's like I can get advice from my friends, you know. I can go to each specific coach, but life coach feels way too generic.
Yeah.
And it feels way too like what kind of advice can I really get going from you? I cannot picture it.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful point because most
you.
people, when they think about,
He is, he really is.
You straight up diss him already.
Just deflects, you know.
He asked me back, what are YouTuber?
Yeah, I bet your job more question.
You talk for a living.
So what he's saying is you just come here and chit chat.
well, people do wonder what value do you bring if all you're going to give me in a coaching session are questions. So this is not to the point where a coach in its purest form will mainly be asking questions and they do not necessarily give advice. Even more, you'll say, then why should I pay you money to ask me questions? You're not even telling me anything. So the value in what a coach would bring would be holding that space for you to have that reflection and time to reflect on questions which you probably might think about but not have the discipline to really think through. In detail. That's one. Asking questions, giving the space, but then also reflecting back and holding you accountable to what you are saying and answering.
Right. So you don't bullshit yourself.
You don't bullshit
Yeah,
yourself.
I think the accountability is actually quite important. Like it's the same reason why you hire a personal trainer. You know, like this guy is going to call you and say like, have you worked out today? And like, are you eating McDonald's or are you eating the chicken breast? And so yours applies to the bigger thing of life.
I see.
Yes.
So how did you end up becoming like a life coach?
Why you must say the you like that? How did you end up being a podcast?
No, how did someone like you?
So how did someone like you?
No, I'm not dissing you. Go outside.
It's just three jealous people and one life coach. This show.
No, but yeah, seriously, like I don't think a lot of people say like, okay, my career path is going to be a life coach.
You probably heard a bit about the background where John and my life kind of crossed when we were in
the
the Navy,
MC.
right?
Navy.
Before
Yes,
the
yes.
emceeings. One of the things that I realized in being in the Navy was that I really enjoyed working together with my crew and helping them grow, not just professionally, but even in their personal lives too.
Right.
And so that was the start to when I thought, okay, what kind of careers would allow me to do that? To be in a one-to-one conversation where I could get paid to help someone develop personally.
Right.
So that's when I started reading more about what coaching was about and felt that that was a good career path to take.
No, so you after Navy, then you explore this. Then what was in between?
She's not benchmarking your age, okay? Because she knows my age.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wonder, like, what's the training involved to be a life coach, because I think Denise alluded to it, right? What do you study to be qualified to advise other people on how to live their life?
I'm more than alluded.
Well, you need to know what hats to wear and what your coachee really needs. Beyond just asking questions, sometimes they actually genuinely want advice because they don't know where to go.
Right.
And if you don't know where to go, you wouldn't be speaking to a coach in its purest sense. Because coach just asks you questions, holds you accountable to those actions. So if I think about what makes for a good training as a life coach, but also someone who could then give advice and wear the training hat, not just a coach, then
I think with many professions, right, especially service-based where you interact with people, there's usually a bell curve. 80% of people are asking the same 10 questions and 80% of people need this same 10 advice. In a short podcast, right, how can we lead better lives?
Okay, so what are some questions you would like to ask a life coach? Just put them down in the comments below, drop a like, and we'll get back to the episode.
wiggle it off. Learning psychology would be a great way to start, particularly the area of positive psychology.
So it
how
does
do you live your best
overlap,
life?
like the...
Yes.
I see.
And I think that's important because sometimes people don't just need a coach. You
Right.
need someone who would teach you, a trainer. Sometimes you need a mentor. Sometimes you need a counselor so that you can live your best life.
Actually, what I didn't realize before I went for therapy was that it's a structured program. So I thought I go there, it's just they talk, like that. But actually, you get homework. Yeah, so you get homework.
Like what?
I mean, if a lot of my issues are rooted in my childhood trauma, right? Then what are steps that you can actively take to improve your relationship with your parents? So she'll give you homework, for example, like, okay, this week I want you to have like 3 instances where you specifically ask your mom this. Yeah, but that is taken from like my sharing with her previously.
Right.
So I'm wondering whether, for example, in life coaching, is there also, so if someone says, okay, I want to work on like making friends, then is there like a form of structured program, and maybe briefly, like what would that look like?
So, one, I think that would have an element of them teaching or sharing, like, how do you make friends in the first place, right? So then you have some elements, but that's where it would be teaching and not just purely coaching. But yes, you would have a structured process because the goal is quite clear to, how to make friends. And then you get very specific about how many friends you want to make, in what realm. Is it because of hobbies? Is it because in what elements or area in your life? And then you go about that structured process.
I must imagine that I can only imagine that it must be so scary, like to feel like it's imposter syndrome on level 1000. Because it's like, for example, I learn computing or coding and then I go and do like computer science or what, right?
There's an answer.
Yeah, and then I train for this. And then so in a sense, he must have the answers to how to make friends.
Or must have the questions.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have the questions.
The questions.
Yeah, because what I'm hearing, right, because my original thought is that a life coach needs to have all kinds of lived experiences.
Yeah.
But what you're saying, right, is that actually it's more about knowing which gears to turn and ask which questions for them to come to their own conclusions in a way.
Absolutely, and that's the second part to the training. So one, if you're thinking about the content that you want to train and teach people so that you can give advice. But when you think about the coaching skills in itself, and when you wear the coaching hat, that's when you might go through a credentialing process. So one of the organizations that I did my credentials with was the International Coaching Federation. So that's where you have to do coaching training. So at the level 1, so there are 3 different levels of being a coach. The associate certified coach, a professional certified coach, and then a master certified coach.
They really want you to make you go for the last ones. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sounds so cool.
So at the first level, then you go through like 60 hours of coaching education and training. You need to have 10 hours of mentor coaching. So you work with a senior coach who would then give you advice on your coaching questions and techniques.
So it's like 2 coach, then 1 trainee, 1 coachee, is it?
Correct. So sometimes the mentor coach might sit in during your coaching session and then they can break it down. This was how you asked this question, or this question that you asked was a close-ended one, or you asked 3 questions at one shot, and that might overwhelm your coachee. So they give you that sort of feedback during the coaching session.
But then when you are a trainee, who are you coaching? Is it like the hairstylist? You
Probably
know?
some discount, you know.
Yeah, the hairstylist, they like, we got a trainee here to cut hair.
There are many of these services whereby, for example, I recently learned off that, which I assume is the same thing.
Yeah.
That if you want to experience career coaching, you can go to a non-professional but like have been learning.
Yeah.
Then they'll just do with you as practice. But it's the same syllabus, like they're teaching from the same understanding.
Right.
No, so you after Navy, then you explore this. Then what was in between?
So having left the military in 2019, I
you were a regular.
I was a regular.
He might ossifer.
No, I thought he just go NS like everyone else.
No lah.
That's when I did my mid-career pivot because I knew I wanted to connect back to psychology in some way. I did 1 year in HR strategy consulting, but that made me realize that maybe strategy work wasn't something that I really loved and was energized by.
Right.
And that's where I connected to working with people, building teams, helping people grow. Eventually, I moved on into my role with BTS. So that's my full-time role. So I'm not life coach full-time. That's just my side hustle. Another side hustle with SUSS, teaching as an associate lecturer.
Right.
But my full-time role is really with this company called BTS. Not the Korean boy band.
I was going to you gotta get it out of the room. Like,
No, so what your day job?
No,
is
what
do
does BTS do?
Yes, so
dance.
we focus on the people side of strategy. So when we are thinking of McKinsey, Bains and BCGs of the world, they come up with the strategy for a company. So what are some of our processes, policies? How do we streamline our manpower and organizational structure? That's the strategy. Now to execute on the strategy, that's where consultancies like BTS comes in.
Right.
So how do we align everyone's mindset to the strategy? Do we know what the strategy is in the first place? That's alignment. Next, do we have the right mindsets to think that I'm confident and we can achieve this change in strategy or cultural transformation? And finally, then we look at the capabilities. What skill sets do we need to enable our whole team to achieve that strategy?
Interesting.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I also didn't know.
Which one's harder, like life coaching or deciding the entire organizational culture of the organization?
I think the latter, because you're moving a whole organization, but dealing with the uniqueness of each individual and how we shift our deepest, darkest demons, but also then to have the motivation to want to act on it.
How much is the sesh with you?
How much is a sesh?
Coaching can range anything from $50 all the way to thousands. So it depends
Right.
on the level of your coach. So generally where I would be charging for an hour would be around $200 an hour.
Right.
So I think it might be fairly similar. I don't know how much a counseling session or being with a
It differs
psychotherapist.
also. It also differs,
Depending on their qualifications, how long they've been doing it.
Yes.
But that's where you get. So like when I was talking, your associate certified coach, your professional one on the master, they also would charge different prices.
So what do people, I mean, I'm approaching my mid-30s, right? What are people around my age asking that I should probably ask myself?
Where should I spend my time such that it's a meaningful use of my life?
It's a great question. I do ask myself that.
So it could be either finding a meaningful job and profession, but also giving back to society a bit more. Yeah.
But that feels like the only two answers, to be honest.
That's one area. Other things that they could look at, how do I earn more money? So I think that would be a lot.
But as a life coach, I feel like that would be like a weird, like that was a sellout advice. You know, like bro, you shouldn't be spending your last $200 here. How do I make more money? Buy work clothes, get job.
So what are the differences in like maybe trends, right? In what the 20-year-olds are asking and what the 30-year-olds are asking?
In my experience at 20s or amongst the 20s, or at least those that I've been mentoring and then having some levels of coaching, whether they're making the right choice. So it's more broad. Which industry should I go? Which industry should I be going into? Is this the right career path for me? How do I accelerate myself so that I can do well in my role? If I'm taking on this management associate position, is this right for me?
Right.
So I think just getting more advice and finding out whether that's the right choice and will that make them happy.
I'm making an assumption here, okay? I think with many professions, right, especially service-based where you interact with people, there's usually a bell curve. 80% of people are asking the same 10 questions and 80% of people need this same 10 advice. In a short podcast, right, how can we lead better lives?
For that, I will ask people to think about life more holistically. So generally, when we think about what it means to lead a good life, particularly in a Singaporean society, we think of good grades, a good career, earning lots of money, a lot of material needs that we are going for. But when we think about life more in general and more holistically, one element of thinking about it is our physical life.
Right.
So when it comes to our health, how much exercise we take, how do we lead a healthy lifestyle? So that's exercise. The other element is nutrition. How are we eating? What sort of nutrients we're
It
getting?
makes sense though. Yeah.
And another element to that about physical well-being would be how much sleep we get. So we normally talk about exercise, our diet, and our sleep. So that's physical well-being.
I feel like I knew the answer, but I needed him to unlock it.
Yeah. No, I was answering the question in my head. What are the aspects to life? So I'm thinking he's going to say mostly it's about career and girlfriend. And I'm like, no, there's career, girlfriend, there's friends, there's contribution to society. And then his first one was physical well-being. I didn't do that.
So that's one element, living our lives. But the next element too would be how do we ensure we continue living our life well? So whether we're going for annual health screenings, that's useful information to know. Do we need to make tweaks to our diet, whether we're sleeping enough, whether we're getting enough exercise? And of course, if you don't feel really well, then go and see a doctor as soon as you can. If we don't live well when it comes to our physical aspects, and we think like stresses in our workplace start showing up, we take really drastic measures in different areas, not really thinking back that, am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating well? This showed up to me maybe about 2 years ago. I couldn't get out of bed because I had a back injury that was from way back. And it just dawned upon me how important physical health was. Because you take it for granted that I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to feel good, and I'm going to show up at the workplace and be fine.
Right.
But the day that you can't get out of bed, you suddenly go back and realize, damn, my physical health is really important. But we take that for granted.
I can totally see what you mean because I don't want to toot my own horn now, but I've been on I signed up for F45 for 28 days.
Wow.
And I challenged myself to kind of go 6 days a week.
And he goes at 5 a.m. by the way, like the worst time.
And I go for the first class that starts at 6:50.
I feel like the instructor damn sian.
No, they're quite good.
They
I love
usually
them.
get paid for doing nothing from 5 to 9.
No,
you clown show
No,
up.
there's like 10 people. Okay, I love you, F45 Downtown East. Okay. But I thought that, oh my God, I'm going to be so tired. And like, this is really going to affect my work day and all that kind of stuff. But it actually, like, it makes me feel more energized, you know.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, like, and I feel better while I'm losing weight and all that kind of stuff. And it feels like there's been ripple effects. And every time people say like, if I look tired, and they say like, oh, it's the F45. I say, no, man, it's not the F45.
Yeah.
It's the work.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Hey.
Is it you need a career coach?
I thought we were on the same side. I thought you were on my side. No, yeah, it's true. I think that like what you say, when people feel under a tremendous amount of stress, they do think about, or maybe my new relationship taking up too much time, or that this job is not it, I need to quit my job, all that stuff. But it's true that people don't really think about, are you eating right? Or like, what you eat at lunch?
Just simple questions.
Yeah, like fundamental shit. Okay, what else? Saying free shit, $200 an hour, guys, your pay up.
Paywall on this episode.
Please top up another $100 for the next few minutes.
Oh God, you sound just like the machine.
Another area is thinking about our physical environment. So that's literally the place that we stay, whether it's even our room.
Is it like dusty?
Is it dusty?
Oh,
A messy room.
Is it very cluttered and you don't feel like you're free?
Marie Kondo.
Yeah,
really?
pretty much like Marie Kondo. But some people can live with creative chaos because they know where they place their things.
Yes.
And if that's the environment for you, then so be it. But you need to make sure that however you want to live, your environment supports that. So for me, being by the sea is really important. And I guess you see that connection with the Navy. So when I was looking for my place to live, being by a water body was so important. And so I'm glad that I managed to get it. Pasir Ris, actually near Downtown East.
I live in Pasir Ris.
Yeah, okay, there. Pasir Ris,
We can go back together. No, I also like to live by the sea, but I'm limited by the wallet.
Oh, yeah.
No, but you got
You live by the sea.
I can't see anything in the longkang. Waterway point.
Yeah. But bringing on to that point, because yes, before we can choose on how we create our environment, we might be limited by our finances. So financial well-being is another area that is important to think about. Whether we are planning for the future, so what happens when I retire? What kind of savings do I currently have to help me lead the life I want to do when I retire? That's one area. 2, if shit hits the fan or things get really tough, do I have the right plans to protect myself against that? So that falls under the area of financial well-being too.
Like when you say safety nets, I mean, simple stuff, right? We're referring to like
insurance, protecting against critical illnesses, for example. Of course, we don't want to think about death, but death, so that we can think about how we protect our own family members or our loved ones, those that we leave behind. Those are things we may want to think about if we can afford it.
Well, his curriculum is mad, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I got my life in order already.
You're going to be a dietitian and going to do all that.
Then after he over there, the benching like 200.
Individually, those people charging 200 an hour. I think I'm undercharging, sir.
I think when we look at what a good life looks like, we talk about the wheel of life, and that's a framework that we look at when it comes to coaching. Physical well-being, looking at your financial well-being, but also looking at relationships. And I'll come to this point later on. But relationships, we break it down into romantic relationships, friends and family, as well as colleagues and peers. But we also look at personal development and how much you are growing and learning. Thinking about giving back to community and spirituality. So this wheel of life helps us look at these different dimensions, and environment, which we spoke about. Another framework, which the father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, talked about, was about PERMA. So there are these different elements too that you can think about when it comes to leading a more fulfilling life. So one element would be positive emotions.
Oh, it's an acronym. Okay.
It's an acronym. Exactly.
I was waiting for you to define.
So tell me what PERMA is.
I thought it was a term.
Not a good time to ask anymore.
So how much positive emotion we derive in life. And this, for example, could be as simple as buying your favorite cup of bubble tea.
Right.
So that brings me some level of positive emotion, and many different ways to get positive emotion. So that's the P. The next one is E, engagement. So how often do you get into a state of flow? So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow when you, so this researcher looks at how difficult a challenge is versus how much skill level you have. And to be in a state of flow, you need to match your skill set to the challenge. So now John and both of you would probably be in a state of flow because the challenge of being on screen or running an episode versus your skill level of being able to speak through it would match. So the time that passes by would almost go by really quickly.
Right.
Can I move on next?
Shit, I'm marinating on that.
That's why blanks are so hard. They're so long.
What's your ass? Don't be supporting.
I don't have the
I can't believe when we both, this is the shit you're thinking about.
F45, guys. F45.
You're the gym bro now, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going in about 9 hours. Yeah, let's go.
And then?
So R, really intuitive relationships. An interesting thing that I was reading about too was, I think it was a nurse or a healthcare professional working in a hospice. And she was just sharing what she heard as the most common regrets on the deathbed, men and women. So you can imagine that some of the most common regrets would be, I didn't spend enough time with my loved ones. I wasn't forgiving enough. I didn't say I love you enough. So it was relating a lot back to relationships. And relationships could be, how do you improve relationships, not just think about how do we argue better. So communication styles for sure. How can you deal with conflict? And then there's this concept of non-violent communications on how you can make requests.
That's
better.
a concept.
Yeah, it's a concept.
It's not a natural instinct.
It's not a crime.
Just go on, hit someone straight
It's not
away.
MMA, that's violent communication.
I'm going to get into a state of flow right now, guys.
Yeah, but tips and tools around that. But I won't go into too much detail on that. But I think one tip around how to get better relationships would be, how do you celebrate the successes with your loved ones even better than we currently do? So this concept is called active constructive responding. Ever heard of it?
No.
Okay, awesome.
So your Asian household don't celebrate.
Oh, yeah. So what you do is, when you talk about active constructive responding, if John were to tell me, I've just got $1 million deal. Woo! Yeah, exactly. So some of the responses will be, woo! And then it feels like a full stop to the sentence. We want to go even further, like, woo! When did you hear about it? Who told you about the deal? How did you get it? You've been working really hard at it. Tell me how you're feeling at the moment. So you're helping them to really savor the win because they get to share more about it.
Right.
That's active constructive responding.
Okay, M.
M.
Making memories.
Make it close.
Money.
What you brought up earlier on, it was
Memories.
meaning. Meaning. And
How
purpose
can
in
we know your
life.
meaning?
Yeah, he's right there.
No, we always don't get the most obvious.
Yeah, so finding meaning in what you do in life, whether it's in your profession, but even your contributions beyond yourself, contributing to a larger purpose beyond just your own needs. So that's meaning. And the last one within Martin Seligman's PERMA is accomplishments. This one we're generally quite good, setting goals and being able to achieve it. So
Sorry,
that's
this is the
PERMA.
framework for what?
Living a good life,
I
so
see.
that you have all these elements that come together that lead a good life. And something else that is added on to PERMA also sounds PERMA, but with a H at the end,
Okay.
health.
Right.
After that, they realized actually we forgot something that was quite important. PERMA.
Yeah, it's a core values. Safety. We need
Permas.
All right, and that's it for today's episode. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, AIA Singapore, and of course, Mark.
Ben.
Marco.
We hope that today's conversation has given you a better idea of how to live your best life and maybe even encourage you to make some changes for the better. If you need some tips to achieve your desired lifestyle or holistic wellness goals, check out AIA's Health 360 initiative through the link below. And that's it for today's episode. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I realized that Jared likes to do this. Yeah, so if you guys want to, then his next time
Angling in for him.
We settle the outtakes.
No, you guys just now I was staring at him just now when doing the outro. Like, so AIA wants you to know that. So check out the link in the-
Emphasizing with each
Bye-bye.
gesture to go.